Welcome in to Run the League. I'm your host, Grayson Grunhafer, and today we're going to continue our recruiting profiles for the NFL draft prospects who are going to be drafted here in April. So let's talk about some prospects. All right, everyone. So today we are going to talk about a wide receiver, the third wide receiver on my list. If you listen to previous episodes, I've talked about Treylon Burks and Garrett Wilson. They're my top two wide receivers in the class, but a close third is Mr. Drake London, the USC wide receiver, big-time prospect, one of the bigger prospects in the entire draft class, size and height-wise. And so we're going to talk about him today, some of the places he could end up, some of his strengths and weaknesses, and then also fantasy impact, what he could bring to the table for your fantasy football team in Dynasty football. So let's start with his high school resume. So he was a top 300 player, four-star prospect, really good athlete, was little under 200 pounds at around 6'4" coming into college. He's now up to 6'5", 210 pounds. A very stout, sturdy prospect. I know some people have him listed at 6'5", 215. I've seen 6'4", 210. But somewhere in there is what he'll probably measure at the combine if he does end up showing up. Moving on to college, he of course went to USC. Really had an awesome year this year. 88 receptions for 1,084 yards and 7 touchdowns. And he did that in 8 games because he sustained an ankle injury during the middle of the season. Really unfortunate because he was on pace to have just a monster season for the Trojans. And I will say, if you go back and look at his first 2 years at USC, he had 2 500-yard seasons, and he was also doing that with Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of being the wide receiver one on those teams. He was still being very productive in the offense. And then this year he had his true breakout year, and it was really impressive. I mean, the guy did some really good things for an offense that was kind of shuffling in different quarterbacks. The coaching staff seemed a little off. Just things really didn't all come together for him, yet he was still extremely productive, which is nice to see. Now, as far as turning on the tape, there is one thing that absolutely stands out above the rest when you're talking about Drake London, and it is the contested catch ability. This guy, pretty much every catch he made, it seemed like it was a contested catch. Just a defender on his back or, double coverage. I mean, there was a lot of things that when you turn on his tape, you go, man, that was a fantastic catch. And you end up saying that over and over again when you turn on the tape for this guy. So that's really his biggest strength. The contested catch ability is really cool. Now, going along with that, he's strong with the ball in his hands. So when he does catch the ball, he's able to break some tackles, but it's mainly due to his strength. He's not really juking guys out or being shifty in the open field. He's just strong. And so he's able to create some yak after he catches the football. He's really good at this kind of quality that's really become popular over the last couple years, and it's his ability to separate late. Now, I'll talk about in the weaknesses. He's not a great separator overall, but when the ball is thrown in the air, he's able to create separation vertically and then even sometimes horizontally. But vertically is where he really, really challenges the defense because he jumps quick and he's able to get over the defender and really make an incredible grab more times than not. And it's really because he catches the ball with his hands. He's able to high point the football. Those various things are very elite. And so that late separation is really big for him. And a guy that came into the league this year that has that elite late separation ability is Jamar Chase. His isn't all the time vertically. A lot of times it's horizontally. He's able to create separation downfield. But yeah, he's kind of got that same ability, just more in the vertical passing game. So as far as Drake London goes, other strengths, he's just a monster in the red zone. I mean, this guy is a monster when you throw him just a fade to the corner of the end zone. If you give him an opportunity against defenders in one-on-one coverage, he's going to be a problem in the red zone. And I think that translates to the NFL. That ability to win in one-on-one coverage inside that area is very, very impressive. And it makes him a guy that I think NFL teams really value because touchdown upside is massive. When you're able to throw the ball up there with a quarterback, and more times than not, the receiver's coming down with it, that's a quality that not a lot of receivers have in the NFL. At least not a ton of them are this kind of in tune with that ability. So I love that about him. Those are some of the main strengths I see. Now, as far as weaknesses go, I mentioned he's not an elite separator. And really, it starts with the line of scrimmage. It starts with intermediate routes. He's just not elite at it. And that's okay. You know, you just see defenders on his back a lot. And while he's able to make a ton of contested catches in college, I am very curious how that translates to the NFL when the cornerbacks are a lot better, when the secondary is a lot better, and you're having to make those contested catches against pros instead of college prospects. That probably will define whether he is a great NFL player or just an average one, whether he can truly continue this contested catch ability at the next level. He doesn't get a great release off the line. It's kind of mediocre. The thing that he does have going for him is he's so strong and big that it sometimes allows for him to make up for his lack of agility, lack of separation with his feet. He's strong and can really get into a defensive back and get the defender off of him, get him off balance. Then that allows him to progress through his route. Like I said, tons of contested catches, the lack of separation. I feel like that has a lot to do with his speed. I'm very curious about that. I'll talk about some comparisons for him here in a minute, but his speed is something I really do have a question about. Is he going to be a guy that goes and runs like a 4.6, or is he more of a sub 4.5 guy? If he's sub 4.5, that's going to make a huge difference in my outlook for him, because when you're talking about guys like Mike Evans or Mike Williams, those guys are very, very fast and get down the field in a hurry. And I want to make sure that he can do that, because sometimes it feels like the coverage is so tight on him. And you go, how is this possible? And well, it might be that 40 time. It might be that long speed that maybe he doesn't quite have. Now, comparisons go. I mentioned the two of them, Mike Williams, Mike Evans. All three of those guys played basketball at one time. Drake London actually played a year of basketball at USC. It didn't last very long, but he did play at the college D1 level. So a very good basketball player. Mike Williams, Mike Evans, very similar in that regard. And both guys high point the football extremely well. The question is, Mike Evans is an absolute burner down the field. Mike Williams is to an extent as well, but obviously Evans is more of a complete wide receiver. I would also throw in Devontae Parker as kind of that mixture, and I think Drake London will kind of fall in between. So it's kind of Devontae Parker at the low end, Mike Williams in the middle, and then Mike Evans as the high end. I really think London can fall somewhere in between that Mike Williams, Devontae Parker range with the upside to get even higher than Mike Williams, most likely. So, yeah, I mean, I see him being a very productive player at the pro level, and it's just about the contested catches translating, the red zone receptions translating, and then just becoming an overall better separator are kind of the areas that I want to see him grow at the NFL level. Now, as far as landing spots go, I've seen him mocked going as high as the Giants at 7, which, I mean, my goodness, if the Giants draft a receiver in the top 7, I would be shocked. They already spent all that money on Kenny Golladay. They drafted Kadarius Toney last year in the first round. That would just be pretty insane to me when you already have Saquon. You have a lot of receiving weapons, and you're going to go draft another receiver. So I kind of don't see that happening, but I mean, he's got a projection inside the top 7. That's pretty phenomenal for Drake London. I've also seen number 9 to the Browns, which would require the Browns trading up to get him. So again, another top 10 projection in a mock draft. I've seen the Raiders at 22. That kind of makes sense, you know, pairing him with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller, especially since they lost Henry Ruggs. That would be pretty that'd be a ton of evidence that they're pretty much done with Bryan Edwards. Obviously, Ruggs gone. So that would be kind of interesting. I feel like the Raiders will go a different direction than wide receiver, though. I really do think they'll either, A, give Bryan Edwards an opportunity this year, or B, take a receiver later in the draft. I don't think they'll spend a first-round pick at pick 22. So my landing spot, the best landing spot that I've seen for Drake London, and one that I think makes the most sense, is the Patriots at 21. I think Mac Jones needs a deep threat. I think Mac Jones needs a guy that's going to go up and make really tough catches for him. I think he fits that offense really well in the play-action passing game. I think that's where London will really excel at the NFL level, just because he'll get a lot more one-on-one coverage. And honestly, defensive backs are not going to want to see Drake London in one-on-one coverage with no safety help. So I think that makes a ton of sense. For the Patriots, they really need to get Mac Jones an elite wide receiver. They need to get an alpha on the outside and allow that running game to really flourish, because if you're forcing, 8, 9 guys in the box because you're running the ball so effectively, you need weapons on the outside to really take advantage of that. And so I think Drake London could be a perfect fit there if he does fall that far to the New England Patriots. Now, as far as fantasy impact goes, I've seen people talking about Drake London as the top receiver in this class, which would probably put him around pick number 2 or 3 in a mock draft that's not super flex. I personally have Drake London around probably 5 or 6. A lot of this depends on landing spot. If he did go to the Patriots, it'd probably be somewhere around there, just because you never know if the volume is truly going to be there in the Patriots offense. And honestly, when you watch the Patriots, they're much better on the NFL field than they are in the fantasy realm, just because they don't really take advantage of just feeding guys the football a ton. I mean, we saw it this year at the running back position with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Those guys were split. Harris fell into the end zone enough to be relevant, but the rest of their weapons just really weren't. You got Kendrick Bourne, you got Jacoby Myers, you had Drake London. It's just, will there be enough passes to go around for all of those guys? But if he lands somewhere else, I could see him rising up a little bit. But as far as just overall as a prospect, I'd probably say right around 5 or 6. I got Breece Hall ahead of him, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, probably Isaiah Spiller as well, and then it kind of becomes a cluster of Kenneth Walker, Jameson Williams, guys like that in that kind of 5, 6, 7 area. So that's Drake London. I think he's going to be a very nice prospect, a guy that I think a lot of people are going to turn on the film and be like, man, this guy is an absolute monster. And you see it. You see it with his contested catches and ability downfield. So that's it for Drake London. Next week, we're going to talk about some more prospects as well as we continue our kind of coverage going into the NFL draft, which is coming up in a little over a month now. So, we're right around that 2-month period. So we're getting closer and closer to NFL draft time, in which we actually get to talk about prospects on rosters, which will be a lot of fun. But for Run the League, I'm Grayson Grundhofer. This is Run the League on NFL on 365 Sports.